Coping with losses. Once upon a time, there was competition. In competition, people could improve upon their skills. But in competing, there had to be a winner and a loser. It sucks to lose. But if you play a lot in a competitive front, you're going to lose about half the time in your journey. So the spirit of this class is sort of focusing on improving the way you deal with that 50% where you lose the game, but still practice, still learn, still compete, still express yourself, and you can still have fun, as surprising as that may sound. The Bruce Lee quote, "It is not a shame to be knocked down by other people. The important thing to ask when being knocked down is, why am I being knocked down?" If a person can reflect in this way, then there is hope for this person. This quote, you could kind of translate that to StarCraft. Instead of why am I being knocked down, why did I lose this particular match? A lot of times, people will lose a StarCraft game, and the first thing they do, I'll do an example, go to the match history, they'll see, let me go to a loss. I want to get a big juicy loss, yeah, 18 points. They go to this defeat screen, there's experience here, I can't go to it because it's match history, but the first thing their eyes check is ladder points lost, here. And then they get upset, because they're like, I'm on the ladder, I want to move up the ladder, but I just lost 18 points. And if I face opponents I'm favored against, I would have to win 3 games to get those points back. And the ladder session becomes about the ladder points and moving up and down, when, as people kind of know with StarCraft, the game is incredibly hard. Dota is incredibly hard. Counter-Strike, whatever competitive like esport game you want to talk about. And let's go to career summary. For someone to move on to the next league, you're going to be in that league and then fluctuate up and down a whole bunch. Let's go on a journey through my career summary, just so you can kind of get a sense of what it looks like to go from starting the game in bronze to GM and beyond. So here, this was my first season in StarCraft. I started in bronze, and my first 2 weeks in the game, I was bronze, and they kind of felt like the worst time in my gaming career. Just because I felt so ignorant, I felt so helpless. I was used to being good at games. Like, what was it? Han, I was playing at near tournament level. In World of Warcraft, I did Arena, and I was Gladiator level. So I was used to being among the best at a game that I was playing. And when I was in Bronze League in Wings of Liberty, I was clearly among the worst. And that was deeply troubling for me. But it was also motivating, because it was like, this is a cool game. I can see how this is a very skill-based game, but I'm lost. And someone's building photon cannons in my base, and it sucks. So the thing that you want to do when you're kind of moving up the leagues is, rather than say, this opponent, what a shitter, like, why would they build cannons in my base? Like Bruce Lee said, ask, why am I being knocked down? What can I do to mitigate that circumstance? If there are cannons being built in my base, maybe you could patrol a worker around the corners of your base just to be a little bit safer, and you can scout it a little bit earlier. So kind of moving up the leagues, you notice it's gold, platinum, platinum, gold, gold, silver, silver. This was a switch to Zerg. But even here, you have some upswings and downswings. I would imagine that even in this stage here, when I was playing Protoss, I got better at certain things, even though in these 2 seasons, I was gold versus these 2 seasons in platinum. And then here, silver, silver, these were Zerg, 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 Zerg. Rank 28 to rank 17 to rank 20, that looks like no improvement, but there was improvement there. There were games played, there were lessons learned, and that was progress on the path. And then Heart of the Swarm, go to 1v1. Check out how many seasons are in Masters here that are all similar rank. So this area is all very, very close to 50% win rate. So half the time you're losing, half the time you have the opportunity to ask, why am I being knocked down? You reflect, and then you adjust. But whenever you get knocked down, and you find out why, and you find out what you're supposed to do, it takes a lot of work to internalize that information. You have to repeat that process. You have to face that all in, or whatever's killing you, over and over again, and you survive slightly longer, to the point where you get a really clean defense for the first time. And then maybe you face an opponent who just outclasses you, like they're a way better player, and they do the same all in. You get crushed again. That can feel really discouraging, but a really useful counter to getting upset by losses is respecting your opponent. That's one of the things in the notes that I kind of call a proactive measure to mitigate demoralization. If you respect the opponent and think of them as someone who has merit, someone who's put in work, someone who has knowledge and can potentially play a really good game, it's not as troubling when they beat you. You face them, they strike at some of your weaknesses, they take advantages, and then they close the game. And you can say, "Yow, bravo, good work." It might be a very frustrating way to lose, but the opponent is your peer. They're a person who plays RTS, and this is a fairly small community, but in a live game. So be cool to them. Like, be ready for the opponent who is about to outplay you, and then be cool. Like, be a graceful loser. I'll go through the other points of the... Oh, go ahead, Coringo.
Yeah, I was going to say, and to that point, I found sort of in adopting the counter BM, that in situations where I've not been a complete jerk, I've found people to practice with, people that beat me in a new way that I can practice with and learn from them, as opposed to becoming an enemy. They become an ally.
Yeah, getting into the psychology of that, if someone beats you, they feel good. It feels good to win. It's StarCraft. And if the loser is nice about it, they admit that they got outplayed, and then they say, "Hey, winner player, amazing person, whatever, would you be willing to practice sometime?" Practice feels great when you're the stronger player and you win most of the time. So for them, they just got an offer to win most of the time in some games. But the loser tends to improve more quickly. So it's sort of a win-win. Like, the winning player gets to flex their muscles, they get to close more games, they get to feel happy seeing victory screens, and the loser gets to exercise against someone who's better than them, which allows them to more easily see their weaknesses.
It also removes a lot of the ladder phobia that people go through. There's no real risk in to lose, so you get to practice actively without any sort of real consequence. It's pure game on your part, I think.
Mm-hmm. So Fitzgerald asks, what about when you make a clear mistake in your loss? How do you not beat yourself up too much? First of all, every game, for both the victor and the loser, both players make an abundance of clear mistakes. That's a fact. It's difficult to see a lot of the small ones, a lot of the subtle mistakes, but if you got really down to the fine-tune milliseconds of decision making, everyone fucks up often. So you want to think about, like, improving the way you flow in the chaos and expecting lots of mistakes. Your goal is to identify the most crucial ones and then lead into making a plan. So the mistakes should lead into what was the better course of action in that situation. And then, how can I practice that? How can I internalize that path of better action? Beating yourself up, it doesn't get you anywhere. It just makes you more demoralized. We all fuck up. You'll get down on yourself sometimes if you repeat a mistake many, many times, but kind of quoting Bruce Lee about practice, I fear not the man who has practiced 1,000 kicks one time. I fear the man who has practiced one kick 1,000 times or 10,000 times. So you can identify a mistake, but for you to really work that out of your sort of weaknesses, it takes time. So you should expect to repeat that mistake many times. Simply put, if the distance between top players and like mid-tier players is that the top players make fewer blunders over the course of a game. The worse you get, the more blunders you see. The higher you move up the ladder, the less big mistakes you make. So focusing on those mistakes is good, but that shouldn't be a reflection on yourself. So going to the notes, the first point is respect yourself. You're a human being. You have a brain, a human brain, which is an amazing, intelligent, organic thing. And then respect your experience, which is the amount of time you've put into the game, which is finite. It's not an infinite amount of time, so you can't have unlimited expectations of yourself. And the main difference between top players and new players is that volume of experience. So some people ask, like, what separates pros from masters players? Most of the time, it's games played. It's the hours that they've put into the discipline, the hours that they've been coached, the hours that they've spent in losing games. Really just big volume is a huge edge. And then also respect your effort. So choosing to play StarCraft, which is a stressful game that's not super rewarding every single session. There's a lot going on, you have to push a lot of buttons to achieve victory. It's cool to put forth a lot of effort and to take some games, so respect that even if you lose.
If I can interject here a little bit, something that I thought was really interesting in putting in more volume, because I know that you've also talked about when you get angry, when you get upset, and identifying, when you're at a 4 versus when you're at an 8, and learning to deal with it sooner. That I've found that in the volume, you learn to identify when you're nervous on sort of a same scale, because it is the repetition of the actual mechanics of the game, but it's also the emotional repetition of learning what you react to and how. So if you get really nervous and that causes more mistakes, you learn to deal and anticipate with that emotional state so that when it happens, it's not quite so jarring. And the more you deal with that, the less it impacts your play over time.
Yeah, it's sort of like its own environment. So ranked ladder play is a stressful environment where there's ladder points at stake, potentially your reputation with that opponent is at stake. If you're streaming, your reputation for the viewers is at stake. And there's a lot to worry about, but the more you enter into a stressful situation, the more calm you become, because you can kind of anticipate more and more of the difficulties you'll face, and you're less surprised by each of those. So there's no substitute for experience. There's no substitute for putting in the work and engaging in spaces where at first it's nerve-wracking and it's stressful, but over time you get more and more calm. I got to see this in myself again with DreamHack Austin performance. So I've played so many StarCraft games that the ladder doesn't really make me nervous at all anymore. Streaming doesn't make me nervous at all anymore. If I face like a huge viewership streamer, sometimes I'll be a little bit nervous, but at the tournament I was quite nervous. And the first series that I played, I really just didn't feel confident in myself, even though the opponent who I faced I could have easily beaten if it was just ladder games. But the environment was different, the stakes felt different, there were people like walking around behind me and stuff. I was just kind of a mess the first series. And then the second series I played Zan, who is slightly better than me, but I gave him an incredibly close series. And over the course of the series, I was about half as nervous as I was the previous one. So you could kind of imagine if a person continues on that front, they will be slightly less nervous on average pretty much every time they engage in that space. So ladder games, tournament games, stage performances, if you're a musician or a comedian or whatever, the more you engage there, the more comfortable you become.
It actually makes me think a lot of, there's like a quote from The Last Samurai where he's like going through the hero's journey, he beats up the kid, and then he's fighting the adult guy and he gets the shit beaten out of him, and his friend like leans over to him and says, "Too many mine." Just thinking about too many things, and every new experience you have those new things coming at you every time. And I remember you mentioning it over Battle.net, from saying how there was so much going on, it was such a new experience. But
Yeah, a way to translate that into like more cognitive talk would be rather than too many mind, consider trusting your body and trusting your intuition in a way that you don't need to sub-vocalize as much. StarCraft is so fast-paced that a lot of the times when you're playing and you really get into flow, you're not thinking, I need to Overlord Scout at 4 minutes. I need to make Zerglings now. It's just happening because you've done it so many times. It's been memorized to the point where those words don't need to pass through your head. You just swarm. It's logical, it's spending, you have APM to spare, and that's a good expenditure of APM, and it just kind of goes through you. So the more, or you could say the less nervous you are, the more likely you are to trust your intuition and to really just flow with what you have. So we'll go into the second point, which is accepting the difficulty of the game. StarCraft is incredibly hard. There's no way around this. Like, none of the races are easy. That's a old and tired meme. Like, Protoss is easy. Terran players will say that Zerg is easy. Zerg and Protoss players will say that Terran is super difficult to play against. But all races are hard. If you don't believe that, try to get GM with all 3 races. It's hard. There's a lot to worry about in every single matchup in the game. So if you put that before you when you're going to play, you say, all right, StarCraft, cool, it's fun, I enjoyed this game, but it's very hard. And you don't need to beat yourself up if you lose something that's very hard. It's expected that many mistakes are going to happen on both sides of the coin. If you're in ZVZ, Lingbane versus Lingbane, neither player is going to have perfect micro, ever, even at a GM level. There will always be suboptimal trades. It's about engaging in those Lingbane fights again and again and again, and making slightly fewer mistakes each time. We already touched on the third point, which is respecting the opponent as a peer and comrade who makes competition possible. Playing against the AI for seasoned players is quite boring. You might use it to test out some builds or to play on one of the new maps or something, but playing against a human opponent is much, much better than a scripted AI. So there's value in that person, even if that opponent is mean-spirited, even if they play a style that is very frustrating. They put in work, and they're a lot more fun and engaging to play against than an AI. The fourth point, take ownership of mistakes and articulate better action. This kind of goes back to the comment about not beating yourself up. You just own the mistake. So you admit it, you say, all right, I detonated all of my banelings when I meant to inject, and that put me very far behind. That's a mistake. It sucks. I actually changed my baneling hotkey for detonating manually because I was doing it too much. Now it happens less often, but if you take ownership of the mistake, then that has value on its own because you're respecting the difficulty of the game, you're respecting yourself, and you're articulating that your experience is finite. And then you articulate what you could have done better. Maybe you need to change something up. Maybe you just need to keep fighting and keep playing the game, and you'll make that mistake less as you get more experience. Expect upswings and downswings in rank and results. This goes back to what we were talking about with the career summary, where season by season you can go up slightly, you can go down slightly. That's something that isn't really worth worrying about as much as knowing what your current weaknesses are. So you can go to statistics and your win rates. This is a much more useful thing to look at than your ladder rank, because this will tell you where you need to put in work, or where you need to get coaching, or the types of opponents that you would want to play custom games against. For me, it's very obvious right now what my weakest matchup is. It's versus Terran. You can also go to maps and then see what your weakest maps are. Wow, I haven't won an arena yet this season. That's funny.
If I can interject, what I found was interesting was I get frustrated by certain events in games. So like dealing with a Liberator. or dealing with Ling Bane, the holding Bane dance. So I'll attach a negative emotional connotation to it, and then I'll go back after a ladder session and check my percentage of win rate, and I'm actually doing well in my versus Terran or versus Zerg matchups. So I think looking at those percentages is helpful in making a difference between what you're actually struggling against versus what you're just frustrated with, and that was a big difference to make for myself.
Mm-hmm. There's a really good TED Talk on stress where it sort of changes the way that it's framed from stress as a bad thing that you want to minimize to stress as something that wakes up your body to rise to an occasion. So it's not necessarily a emotion that works against you. It can be one that helps you, like really take the game seriously, take the situation seriously. I definitely understand that feeling when sometimes you just start playing ladder and you're still kind of groggy, you're still kind of waking up, you're not warmed up yet, and then the first like 3 opponents just cheese the shit out of you and you just die miserably, and it's like you get slightly pissed off, and that can help you like kind of take the game seriously, be like you're not raging to the point where you're being toxic to the opponent, you're not hating the game, you're just saying, all right, this is a violent place. Like, ladder is dangerous. There's a lot of shit to worry about. And if you want to win, you have to really focus on the opponent, really identify any small missteps they take and be able to punish those. It's a fighting game. Like, it's a war game. It's not a pat each other on the back, hey, let's shake hands and be cool. No, it's... You can shake hands and be cool after the game. During the game, it's a duel.
It's my favorite way of describing why you're worth watching as a streamer. It's because you describe StarCraft as being my job is to kill you, not to have afternoon tea. And when I don't participate in in-game chat that distracts me from killing you, I don't take it personally if you get upset about that, but that's just a thing.
Yeah, that's why I get a little bit peeved when people get upset when you don't respond to their questions in game chat. Like, the match is underway. People are buying their camera location hotkeys. They're making sure their workers are stacked correctly, and they're like, hey, what's up? Where are you from? Are you streaming? It's like, dude, just fight me.
Honestly, every time that I see people talking in chat, my initial reaction is, where is the proxy? That's literally how I interpret any amount of large chat dialogue early in the game.
Yeah, I talked about that in one of the games I played before we started this class, which was your frustration about a matchup can sort of be like a mental checklist when you get into the game. So, say it's ZVP. You start the match and you could say, what is the worst thing that could happen? Well, maybe having 4 gateways of chrono boosted zealots that are rallied into my base, that would be pretty shitty. And that helps you remember to scout. And what's the next shitty thing that could happen? Oh, I could get cannon rush at this base. Maybe I'll patrol a worker around and check for some probes or pylons or whatever. What's the next shitty thing that could happen? Adepts. Oh, what's next? DT. Using those areas where you get pissed off and kind of building that as a toolkit for understanding what you need to be worrying about and accounting for and defending over the course of your matches. So the next session I did was some common sayings worth dropping. There are a lot of bad ideas or bad sayings that people carry with them in their ladder journey. A lot of people say them, so it kind of seems like they have merit just by virtue of a lot of people using them. But the first one, I threw the game so hard. This is so useless to ever say. Every single loss you earn with your mistakes. Every loss is a throw. So to see a loss and be like, oh, game of throws, like, whoa, that was a throw. Of course it was a throw. Every single one is a throw. You start from an even position with even workers, you macro up, and someone makes more mistakes than the other player. To say I threw, or someone threw, it doesn't really provide anything useful. It only articulates that it was a loss. What you would want to do is focus on the specific mistakes that created that loss, and then articulate the better actions you could have taken, rather than just, letting it sit on, oh, I was so ahead and then I lost. Well, first of all, how did you get ahead? How did you get to a good position where you threw the game? And then how could you have extended your advantages or created new advantages with that lead? And then another thing I mentioned here is congratulate the opponent. Like, if they made a sick comeback, maybe you fucked up, but they made a comeback, good job. Like, that's cool. And they probably enjoyed that game. So, if nothing else, the opponent got to savor a victory from behind. That's cool.
I've also started complimenting if I do something cheesy. So if I do like a 14-14 or I do a 13-12 and they just respond in the perfect way and roll me, I say that before I GG, like, excellent response, like, masterfully played, something like that. And they, like, especially as someone who's experienced cheese and been frustrated, you give them that little bit extra of, yeah, I cheesed and that might have been frustrating to you, but good job, dude. Like, that was exactly what you should have done, and that works out.
The next one, that was a free win / build order win. The Muslim, please. He uses free win a lot. He's written multiple articles. I don't want to like focus on people in particular, but it's a widespread thing. People will say that a matchup is bad because there are too many free wins or free losses. It's blatantly false. There are build order advantages that you can consider, but it's not a free win. If you're using builds that leave big openings to certain builds, you have to really accept that fact. You have to accept, all right, I'm going 3 hash before pool in ZVZ. If the opponent goes for 12 pool, or 13 pool, or 14 pool, I'm dead. But if they go for hatch gas pool, I'll be in an amazing position. You have to accept that. You have to accept the advantages and disadvantages of what you're doing, rather than think of matchups as a coin toss of, all right, the coin is up, and you got the right build, you won. No, it doesn't work that way. As you improve, as you play a lot of games, you can recognize a lot of situations where maybe, like on paper, one player has a really big build order advantage, but the other player is just better. They're more experienced, they have better micro, multitasking, and macro, and they muscle their way back into a leading position and eventually take the game. It happens a lot of the time. Blizzard needs to fix this matchup. FLO, please. Lots of people will blame a matchup, and their frustration toward the game is because a given matchup is messed up. No matchup is going to be perfectly balanced, except for mirror matchups, ever. They can get the balance really, really good to where win rates are approaching 50% across all players, but that ebbs and flows. Sometimes in Zerg versus Terran, the win rates are favoring Zerg, and then sometimes they're favoring Terran, and then they start to favor Zerg again, and then they favor Terran again. This is over the course of years, but it sort of flows back and forth between the two. So rather than like feel super strong and amazing and credit yourself when your race is really strong, and then shit the bed and rage at Dave and Kim when your race is weak, just get better. Create a gradual upward trend of your ability rather than just ride the wave up and down of balance. Even when your race is weak, you can become stronger. When your race is strong, you can become stronger. Think about your personal journey rather than constantly evaluating the state of balance in the game. Legacy of the Void right now, I feel like, is pretty balanced. It's not perfectly balanced. It's not as balanced as Heart of the Swarm was at the end of the expansion. It's way more balanced than the beta, the Legacy of the Void beta. But it's pretty good. The better player usually wins. The next one, I'm bad, which is like a global evaluation of yourself. StarCraft is a hard game. Going back to that principle of respecting the game and respecting yourself, mistakes will be made. Focus on the mistakes. It's not about figuring out whether you're a good or bad person, a good or bad player, figuring out whether you're smart or not. You are who you are, and that's cool. StarCraft is a hard game, so if you want to enjoy the game and improve, focus on the details of where you fall behind, where you make mistakes, what you want to learn, and how you want to approach the game. And then, kind of in this bottom section, I'm not going to read the article, but I wrote an article on crushing defeats, which is sort of dealing with hard losses and then how to go about taking responsibility, which we talked about in this class, and then getting help from other people. It's much better to be in a losing position or lose a game and be confused and say, all right, who can I ask for help? Can I go to a stream and maybe ask a broadcaster? Could I maybe go into one of my Skype groups with some other people of the same race and say, hey fam, what are you doing against this particular timing attack? And people will help you out. Like, the StarCraft community is very, very good at communicating with each other about what to do in given situations. That's kind of why the meta moves in big waves. Is at the top tier, people see the best players in the world going for certain styles, and then the high tier players who are not tournament competing, but they're competitive, they see that and they implement that, and they talk about it. They talk about how it's strong and how it's weak, and then it kind of filters down across the leagues. So don't be afraid to ask people for help. It's not a bad thing to humble yourself and say, hey, I'm lost in this situation. I don't know what to do. What are you people doing? Cool. So any feedback from the chat? Any ways that you vent or cope with losses or anything related to the subject matter? I didn't talk too much about venting, but venting is important. There are situations where you do feel upset about how a match played out. It could be due to their tactics and their strategy. It could be due to BM, but understanding how to take care of yourself, when to step away from the game. You shouldn't really force yourself to play in a way that makes you more and more angry to the point of like a keyboard smash. So knowing when to kind of step outside, get some fresh air, take a drink of water, take a break, or take the day off is really crucial as well.
I found value myself in, at least for 2 or 3 games, trying to play through frustration. I found that when I walk away, I tend to stay away from the game after a really bad loss too long. So when I've had a rough loss, I think it's been a learning process for me to force myself to play like 2 or 3 more games. And if it gets worse, then obviously take a break and walk away. But the game is so cyclical in nature from a win-loss ratio that if you walk away after a rough loss, you don't give yourself the opportunity to recover. You don't give yourself the opportunity to improve your sort of daily mindset in that particular ladder session. And a lot of times it does tend to turn around, even if you only win 1 more game out of the next 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm. I had a pretty frustrating couple days of games. After I moved back from the team house, I took a week break. And even in that amount of time, a lot of my fundamentals slip up a little bit. My readiness for dealing with various cheeses and timing attacks slips up a little bit. And I had a big downswing, so I probably lost like 15 out of 20 games that I played off stream. And it wasn't fun. Like, I was pretty pissed off. I was losing against players who I normally beat pretty easily. So I didn't play as much in those days, and that's fine. You kind of just have to be patient with yourself getting back into the swing of things. Practicing patience is its own skill, and I'm not perfect on that front. I get frustrated and pissed off at the game and at certain situations and stuff. So it's okay. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to be pissed off. That should kind of flow into an understanding of what's going on in the situation, what factors are causing you to play worse, accepting those factors, and then putting in work, getting better at the game, and having fun.
I think also it's important to give yourself permission to fail. I think that's when you give yourself the opportunity to learn the most. And I remember the beginning of last season, I was a high-level gold player for, hey-oh, high-level gold, that's worth something. But I remember I started that season, the following season, with something like an 8 or 10 game loss streak, and I was really frustrated. And I took a break for like a day, came back, reapproached the game, and took my time to really try to learn from those experiences. And that was when I hit platinum. And you can go into a season 0-8 and get promoted a week later if you really apply yourself and learn from what you did. I think the frustration and the glory come in equal amounts. It's very easy to make the frustration the focal point, so it outweighs the positive points of the game.
Kind of speaking to that notion, you can create volume-based goals for a given season. I did this for quite a few of the seasons when I was in Masters in Heart of the Swarm, where I would say, all right, my goal for this season is to play 1,000 ladder games or 2,000 ladder games. I think there were a couple seasons where I played 2,000. But if that's your goal, every single time you play a match, you feel like you're making progress and that you're getting somewhere, rather than sometimes people will have a goal to get promoted to the next league, which it's not always clear when that's going to happen and what you need to do to get there. But if you continue to put in work, you will continue to get better at some rate. So volume-based goals are really useful for mitigating the frustration of losing your games.